In 2005, Avatar: The Last Airbender premiered on Nickelodeon. The show was a massive success, critically and commercially, and has held spectacularly well against the test of time. The show's success is due in no small part to its great world building. The Avatar universe was tight and well constructed, a believable world with a strong sense of culture and history that drew from many real-world sources, from Buddhist philosophy to Chinese architecture and many forms of martial arts. It's the kind of fantasy world we love to imagine ourselves into, the kind we often wish was real. Although there are still some things about this universe we can all be grateful don't actually exist. The top 10 scariest things in the Avatar universe. Number 10. General Thawne. In the first episode of Season 2, the kids meet an Earth Kingdom general who wants to harness the Avatar state in order to lead a direct attack on the Fire Lord. Aang protests that the Avatar state is unpredictable and dangerous, and that he's never been able to trigger it on purpose. The general convinces Aang to at least give it a try, experimenting with everything from energy-enhancing tea to tapping into the essence of all 4 elements. But up to this point, Aang had only ever triggered the Avatar state by succumbing to intense emotions like grief, anger, or distress. Hearing this, the general tries to force the Avatar state by attacking Aang and his friends, eventually threatening to bury Katara alive.
You could save her if you were in the Avatar state.
I'm trying!
General Thawne has no problems causing emotional distress to a child who already has such a heavy burden. First, by laying on the guilt trip of how many innocent lives are lost every day the war goes on, then by directly attacking this child and his friends. The General's gambit works, and Aang does go into the Avatar state, destroying the compound in a matter of seconds. And yet, despite the destruction he just witnessed, the General still wants to push ahead with his plan. In the first season, we were introduced to the 4 nations and shown how the Fire Nation had destroyed balance by invading the other 3 with intent to conquer them. For a while it was the Fire Nation against the rest of the world, but by the end of Season 1, we were beginning to see that not all firebenders were inherently evil. And with the opening of Season 2, we were beginning to see that not everyone who opposed the Fire Nation was inherently good. It was a nice balance of expectations and character development that would only grow deeper as the show progressed.
We just have to find out a way to control you when you're like that.
You're out of your mind.
Number 9. The Fire Nation. The Fire Nation once lived in peace with the rest of the world, but everything changed with one power-hungry leader. Though Sozin tried to hide behind good intentions of sharing Fire Nation prosperity with the rest of the world, what he really wanted was not an exchange of knowledge, but the subjugation of the rest of the world. His son and grandson and great-granddaughter would follow in his footsteps, plunging the world into despair and chaos. When the Fire Nation is introduced to us, we see them as ruthless invaders, oppressors, cruel and heartless. As the series wore on, we began to see this wasn't the case everywhere, but before balance is restored, we have plenty of opportunities to see just how far some firebenders are willing to go in the name of power and perfection. These are the people who would sacrifice their children to save their own lives, the people who have no problem with genocide. And until the Fire Nation's honor is restored, it is the last place in the world you'd want to live. Well, maybe second to last.
Fire. It's sometimes so hard to control.
Number 8. The Swamp. On their journey, Aang and his friends find themselves lost and separated in a mysterious swamp. While trapped there trying to find each other, they're haunted by visions of people they've loved and lost. Danger seems to be lurking around every corner. The swamp is a deeply spiritual place, and even though it has much to teach them, it seems to have a mind of its own. A mind that may not be entirely benevolent. And by the time the kids do leave the swamp, they're almost just as confused and in the dark as when they arrived. Number 7. The Avatar State. The Avatar State is the Avatar's ultimate power, allowing him access to the wisdom and strength of all the past lives.
The glow is the combination of all your past lives.
But it requires patient meditation and deep spiritual understanding in order to control. And before Aang masters it, it is deadly and unpredictable. Triggered by intense emotion, it sends him into a frenzy of unstoppable rage. Especially unsettling is that Aang is a peaceful, fun-loving child who hates violence and has a deep respect for all life. But when the Avatar state overtakes him, he transforms into something unrecognizable, a monstrous force with glowing eyes and a voice of the Legion. capable of destroying anything and anyone who gets in his way.
Tell me where all is!
Number 6. Wan Shi Tong. The great knowledge spirit Wan Shi Tong built a magnificent library, brought it to the material world, and filled it with books from all 4 nations, so that humans could better themselves through learning. But humans began abusing the knowledge they gained, so Wan Shi Tong sunk his library and grew to distrust all humans. When Aang and his friends find the library, they barely manage to convince the knowledge spirit that they mean no harm. And when he discovers that they plan to use the information they gained from the library to invade the Fire Nation, he is outraged.
You don't understand. If anyone's evil, it's the Fire Nation.
You think you're the first person to believe their war was justified?
The angry knowledge spirit is a frightening sight, with that creepy outstretched neck, sharp talons, and otherworldly screech. He has no qualms about mounting the kids like hunted game, and once again they barely make it out alive. The Last Airbender always did a great job of not taking the war lightly, and the destruction of innocent lives was a theme throughout the series, especially with the ever-looming question of what Aang would do when he finally faced the Fire Lord. Could a child raised by monks to respect all life really take a life in the name of restoring peace to the world? If there's one lesson to be taken from the library, it's that knowledge is power, and power corrupts. And maybe the library really wasn't meant for humans to find.
I'm afraid I can't allow that. You already know too much.
Number 5. Ko, the Face Stealer. Ko was an ancient spirit with the body of a giant centipede and the face of, well, no one knows what his real face looks like, if he even has a true face. Ko is a collector who, as his name suggests, steals faces. How does he steal your face?
You must be very careful to show no emotion at all, or he will steal your face.
Unless you are the ultimate stoic, I think you'd be better off hiding and praying Ko doesn't find you. Either way, this is one seriously scary spirit.
It's been a long time since I've added a child's face to my collection.
Number 4. Long Fang and the Dai Li. Ba Sing Se, the Impenetrable City, the city of walls and secrets. Ba Sing Se is the capital of the Earth Kingdom and the last great stronghold, the only place in the world that hasn't been touched by the Fire Nation. But there's a reason for that. The longer the kids spend in the city, the more they start to realize something isn't right. People seem afraid to talk about the war, they aren't allowed to put up posters searching for Appa, and one of their neighbors even tells them to keep their heads down if they don't want any trouble. With the weight of the war and their lost friend on their shoulders, the kids keep pushing for answers and discover an unsettling truth about the city. The Dai Li is corrupt and peace is enforced through Big Brother politics. Troublemakers are brainwashed or snuffed out. There was a lot of build-up for Ba Sing Se. Characters spoke of it with reverence as the great cultural and political cornerstone of the proud and strong Earth Kingdom. As the only place left in the world untouched by the Fire Nation, we had come to expect a peaceful, safe haven. But when we finally got there, the city felt more like a prison. Maybe there were no firebenders, but one step out of line could be disastrous, and after struggling for so long to get here, we couldn't wait to leave.
There is no war within the walls. Here we are safe. Here we are free.
Number 3. Azula. Azula was raised in probably the most messed up family environment a child could possibly be raised in. She was the privileged child, the prodigy, constantly showing up her screw-up of an older brother and constantly praised for being so perfect. Azula was twisted right from the beginning, hiding and watching in glee as her father was punished by her psychotic grandfather, cheerfully declaring that their father was going to kill Zuko, even playing dangerous games with her friends. This was the girl who watched with satisfaction as her brother's face was horribly scarred. Azula craved power, but unlike her father, who didn't seem to care whether the people he ruled over lived or died, Azula seemed to live for the cruel satisfaction of seeing those around her emotionally destroyed. Azula went for the jugular, fighting dirty with both her actions and her words. Even her friends are terrified of her. When she recruits Ty Lee for her elite fighting force, she's calm and collected even when Ty Lee initially turns her down. She'll get the yes, and she knows it. And Ty Lee knows there's no escaping Azula's power and influence. Azula may not be the big bad of the series, but she's certainly the show's most tragic villain. There's a great shift in her character near the end as she starts to lose control. When her ambition and power and all her fear tactics start to fail her, she unravels, making her even more dangerous and deadly right to the very end.
Maybe you should worry less about the Tides, who've already made up their mind about killing you, and worry more about me, who's still mulling it over.
Number 2. Fire Lord Ozai. Never has the phrase complete monster seemed so appropriate for the big bad of a family show. The creators knew how to present this guy to make him as threatening as possible. Throughout the first 2 seasons, we were only given glimpses of him, always in shadow and surrounded by flames. But when we finally did get to see him, he wasn't a monster. He wasn't even that physically impressive. He was just a normal human being. But that made him all the more terrifying. Ozai is driven by his ambition. His father and grandfather before him had a plan to conquer the world. That plan would finally come to fruition with him, and he would sit on the throne of every nation. In his quest for power, Ozai cared not for human life. When the Earth Kingdom remained the last great obstacle in his path, his plan was not to force them into subjugation, but to burn them to the ground, to eliminate them completely, just like his grandfather had committed mass genocide before him when he'd wiped out the air nomads. This was the man who scarred his own son's face for speaking out of turn, who was willing to sacrifice that same son to save his own life. When it came down to it, nothing mattered more to Ozai than his status in the world. Everything and everyone was expendable, and by series' end, we detested this man and everything he stood for.
You will learn respect, and suffering will be your teacher.
Number 1.
What I'm about to show you, I discovered in that wretched Fire Nation prison. Once you perfect this technique, you can control anything, or anyone.
Bloodbending. Bending gives a person complete control over one of the elements. Water is the most adaptable and diverse, giving a person power over all its forms: vapor, liquid, and solid ice. Waterbending is a highly defensive practice, turning an opponent's strength against them. Waterbenders are resourceful, drawing water from whatever source they can find, and even creating their own sources. And all living things are made of water. It's a testament to how tightly this world was constructed that the idea of bloodbending was first introduced, not within the show itself, but on the official Avatar site for Nickelodeon. On the About page, fans could read about the 4 nations and bending styles, and the waterbending section actually mentioned that waterbenders could control the fluid in another living being's body. This is how well the creators thought ahead. They foreshadowed this concept long before it was even whispered about in the show. And when it finally became a factor, it was creepier than we ever could have imagined it. Everything about this episode makes you feel the pain and anguish of these characters as they're forced to fight each other. And finally, as Katara is forced to make a terrible choice.
Congratulations, Katara. You're a bloodbender.
Not everything in the world of Avatar is good and happy and pretty, so it makes sense that a show that so perfectly captures reality in its story and characters and themes could also so convincingly recreate the things that scare us. War, death, loss, the monsters we face in life, and the monsters inside of ourselves all help make this story so much more believable. And even if we can be glad that things like Ko and bloodbending don't actually exist, we can still appreciate the great shows they give us. I'm eternally optimistic, wishing you a very happy Halloween. And when it finally became a factor, it was creepier than we ever could have imagined it. Hey, can I call you right back?
You sure can.
Alright, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.